Howdy, everybody. I am finishing up the restoration of a 1953 Montgomery Ward's radio. And if you're just tuning in and you're familiar with old radios, then you know that they need to be recapped. And so this one's been recapped, meaning all the capacitors have been replaced as observed by underneath. And what I'm doing right now is just kind of cleaning up the chassis a little bit. It's not necessary. I'm just a little OCD, but what I'm going to do today is add a audio input to this via this audio cable so that whoever gets this in the future could listen to their phone or their Bluetooth or whatever they're going to connect to this radio, which reminds me I need to go get my Bluetooth so I can start charging it up in preparation for the test. Get these things real cheap online. These are maybe a few bucks. This is a stereo one, which is overkill, but they come in other forms. There's a mono one. We buy these things in bulk. You can get these for maybe $1 if you buy them in bulk. It's obscene. So I'm going to charge up the Bluetooth so it can be ready. All right. Before we get too much further, I need to mention my disclaimer, which is if you're going to work on vintage electronics or electronics in general, you are dealing with potentially dangerous voltages and other things that could be lurking about underneath the chassis. So I advise that unless you are properly trained and familiar with this type of electronics, that you probably should not be sticking your hands in these things. So just need to say that. Everything you see on this channel is more for your own entertainment purposes only. All right. So what I did before I started, because I knew it would be annoying to you guys, would be I drilled a hole. Actually, there's a hole already in this chassis. That's made it a little bit bigger. I put this rubber grommet. Then I've tied a knot. If someone tries to yank on that, it's not going to come out. And it's also not going to get cut on that metal. And what I'm going to do is run this stereo cable into a mono connection with this, which is this RCA jack on the back here. And what I'm going to do is simply wire it into that existing phono connection. I'm going to leave the phono connection there because who knows, maybe someone at some point will want to connect a record player to it. And they could. But they could also listen to whatever's going to hook up to this audio cable. And what I need to do is make sure we have a right and left channel, and I just dropped my tool. A right and left channel, and then a ground, which is this mess of unshielded wire. So I'm just going to twist that up. And then we have our right and left channels here. But we just can't twist those together. Some people think if you just twist the channels together, that gives you mono. And there's not a large potential, but a potential just the same that you could damage the input device if you twist your positives and negatives together and don't put anything other than that. So I just realized I didn't get one of the components that I need. I need to re-up on some of my supplies here. Sorry. It's called Live Radio Repair. Should have looked closer at my parts before I grabbed them. Let me do something here.
tune that in. Tell your friends about it. Tune in on our website.
That's wrong.
And hey, once again,
Just need one more value that's close to that.
and 93.9 FM. We're looking to get this thing really sparkling for you. To get you looking wild, but if you're visiting the Great Smoky Mountains, bring your radio because we are on the radio. 93.9 FM.
Come here, bad boy. Get in there. Get out there. Crap, where'd it go? Well, that'll do. So what we want to do is put two resistors and twist their ends together like this. And I'm going to turn my soldering iron on because I need to solder these ends together.
Every single good Wednesday night, this is Tony Lawson. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting East Tennessee's own WDVX. Turn to the left, turn to the right. Tell me what do you see?
All right, what I'm doing is I'm running my right and left channels through these resistors, and both ends of one side of the resistors tie together. And that's a better way of tying your right and left channels together. And the value is kind of ambiguous. I go anywhere from like 20 to 30 ohms per each resistor. You know, ideally you want to match them. Otherwise you'll get slightly funnier noises. Okay, so now we got our positives and negatives, both right and left channels. The incoming audio going to the positive of the phono connection. And then the shielded ground needs to go to the chassis. And let me make something very clear right here. Do not do what I'm doing on a radio that does not have a power transformer, meaning crap just fell out of my recycling bin. But anyway, if you do this to a hot chassis set, you run the risk of shocking yourself. You need to put an isolation transformer between you and the chassis if you're going to do something like that. But on a set like this that has a power transformer, you can do this. You can go directly through the audio connection. I want to confirm this works. I think the easiest way is to shove it back into the case. I was working on the case last night while watching TV. Decided to get out my car wax. So be careful with the Bakelite. It's very easy to mess it up because it's kind of sensitive. Okay. It's on phono.
don't want the cats in there.
Okay. Okay. Warm up.
Gonna shake your telephone. After midnight, it's gonna be peaches and cream. We're gonna cause talk and suspicion, even exhibition. Find out what is our label. After midnight, we're gonna let it all hang.
It sounds pretty good, actually. Now, one thing I'm not wild about is the power cord. Power cord's kind of crappy on this thing, so it needs to be replaced. Apparently some special tool for removing these things. Should buy one because a lot of these radios come with these stupid things. Okay. That's my cheap and dirty way of getting it off of there. Okay. Yeah, this old cord is shot. So we can go immediately into the garbage. All right, I'll be back in a second. I'm going to grab a new cord for this. Yay. So what I do is I'm constantly walking around looking for, well, I don't really constantly look for it, but if I see any appliances that are being thrown away on the side of the road, like lamps and stuff, I cut the cords off, keep a pair of pliers in my truck at all times just for that purpose. It's skinny enough where I can use that same stupid plastic thing to get this back in there. Hate these stupid things. Ah. Man, I went and saw Love It live one time. The band is indeed quite large. There we go. It's not polarized, so it doesn't matter. Okay. Just a comment about polarized plugs in old radios. In particular, when it comes to hot chassis radios, which this is not. But if you put a polarized plug on a hot chassis radio, as soon as you turn that radio off, the ground is going to go right through the filaments of the tubes, and you're going to have a hot chassis with the radio turned off. When you turn it on, it'll be running neutral. So in my opinion, it does not really make sense to put a polarized plug on a hot chassis radio, because it's going to sound like garbage one side of the plug or the other. So you want to have that flexibility to flip it over if you want. If you are genuinely concerned about a hot chassis radio, there's ways to get around it. And one way that we're starting to get around some of these is by putting a GFCI plug, like the ones that come on a hairdryer, on the radio. So if anyone does anything stupid, like stick their hands inside, which I see no reason to do so, but if they did, the GFCI is going to trip.
We'll have a couple tunes from the String Dusters here at the top of the show, and a full set of songs that are going to take us to the end of the line here.
By the way, if you have guys who have never experienced a Metcal soldering station, change your life. They're wonderful.
This one called Holding On to You.
It uses
String Dusters on the Americana Pulse on WDDX.
induction. That said, my this tip is worn out. I need to get another one. Get about 4 or 5 months out of them, and they're wear out.
Open up the window, let them out into the night. They won't make it easy, they won't leave us out.
Okay. Looks like everything is good and hunky-dory here. And what I also want to do is replace the rectifier that's in this guy, because the one that was in it when I tested it yesterday was very, very sad. It's my least favorite tube. So what I found is a new old stock, I think military supply 6X5. It's never been used. Let's pull this out. So I went and looked for some of these in our stash at the museum, and that's never seen the light of day. That's an original 6X5. And I'm not going to technically explain why, but what I have found is the reliability of this particular tube is, for some reason, this style right here that has this kind of like the single plate structure fails way more reliably than this style that I've found that has the two different kind of offset plate structures. And I'm not sure if that makes a difference as far as how it's made. But with this 6X5, I had a problem where the filament literally just springs out of the top. It's ridiculous. So now we have a rectifier that's firing on all cylinders. The old one was only measuring about 40% of minimal. So the fact that it worked at all is kind of a miracle. Now, what I want to do before I call the chassis done is come in here and oil up and lubricate some of the tuning mechanism. So in almost all of these American sets, you're going to find a ball bearing towards the front. And let me, so I can move this out of the way. Get a little bit close in here. Okay, you see up here, I'm not sure if you can see it in the camera. There's ball bearings in there, and they originally had some sort of grease or oil on them. That dries out with age. So I use this zoom spout oiler. And you want to get the front. Back bearing is just a metal to metal, brass on metal fitting. But I touched that up, and I just put a little bit of oil, like the tiniest amount, just to get into where the pulleys are. And then I want to do the metal shaft that goes through the chassis. And now, and already almost immediately that just tunes a lot better, or it just feels a lot better. It's moving much more smoothly. I'm sure it's making a god-awful noise though. Stupid things like bent over somehow. It's like there's a spring-loaded. See if I can tuck this in a little bit. That should do it. Okay, that's better. Now, what I did last night too was I was missing a knob, and so I decided to make my own. So I went digging, and I found a whole bunch of this kind of knob that didn't have a shaft, like it was flush. So I got one of these. I got this plastic piece, and I glued it down in here. So it's like from the side profile, are the same length. So when I put this back together, you won't see that. So it's partially why I got the radio for cheap, because it was missing a knob. It's not like this is a highly desirable radio anyway. It's not like any Montgomery Ward's radio is going to be like the darling of anyone's collection. These radios played an important role. They helped usher in the radio for the masses. And the thing is, there's an interesting statistic when it comes to radio as far as the technology goes. When introduced, radio was the most rapidly adopted technology in human history. And that goes for up to present day. There's a lot of hype about AI and its adoption. And, the internet was also kind of obviously a major change in my lifetime, but its adoption was not nearly as quick. But for whatever reason, radio was massively adopted, kind of in a very quick way. And there was obviously a lot of money to be made in it. And the American broadcasters were very keen on monetizing it very fast. That's why almost immediately from the get-go, you had RCA, who owned NBC, and General Electric. You had all these huge companies that got in on radio and radio broadcasting. And it was an extremely, effective and powerful tool to advertise with. I think, part of the reason I got into radio was because I wound up doing advertising work for a living. This was fascinating to me that the medium was totally just about audible, and then television came out and it opened up a whole new genre of advertising. What I'm doing is using Carnauba paste wax. It comes in a tin similar to that. I particularly like, for some reason, McGuire's. And it needs to be a natural Carnauba wax, not a synthetic. Natural Carnauba kind of has a banana smell. And what I do to expedite this, and I'm not going to do it because it's too noisy. Well, actually, let me show you what I tend to do when I'm working on these. So a few years ago, I determined that polishing these guys was wearing out my hands. It was making my hands cramp up. So instead, I started getting these attachments for my drill. And that way you can just, come in here and get a little wax and then do this. All right, well, I'll be honest about this step. Sometimes this actually takes longer than restoring the rest of the radio. Depends on how bad the Bakelite's in. This one is not wonderful, but there's a couple words of warning about how you treat Bakelite. The shininess of it is just at the surface level. This is a, believe it or not, a semi-organic plastic. It's made out of phenol plastic resin and some sort of organic filler material. It's usually like ground up jute or some other cellulose-based product. And so once you scratch that very thin, shiny surface, you're going to get down to, well, I'm not sure if you can see this. I think it's going to be rough all the way through, so be gentle on it. There's a lot of people that get these, and the first thing they do is they dump it into the bathtub and scrub the crap out of it, not realizing they're forever ruining the Bakelite. And if I get a set where the Bakelite is ruined, The only other way you can deal with that is if you try to buff it out, which is sometimes not possible, or spray it with lacquer or shellac, or you can repaint it. If we get like some very plain Jane common Bakelite radio that they make millions and millions of, and it's got a crappy Bakelite, that gives me a license to kind of paint it some interesting color. But as expensive as spray paint is getting, I'm way more likely to try to preserve the original Bakelite if I can help it. Plus, as I get older, I think I prefer that. When I was younger, I would just paint them like wild colors occasionally. I don't know what this is up here. It's like paint. Someone got house paint up here. Luckily, it's coming right off with my thumbnail. Fingernail. Recently did a Montgomery Wards from about the same time period that had FM, and FM worked really well actually. There were some of the radio manufacturers that got FM right and some of them that really didn't. It all had to do with about licensing, and one of the best FM circuits was the Armstrong circuit, the Armstrong circuit design from Edwin Howard Armstrong. And Zenith knew it, and Zenith really cared about their engineering, and they chose to use his system, as did a lot of the German manufacturers, such as Telefunken. In fact, you'll look on the back of some of the early to mid-50s Zenith and Telefunken radios, and it'll have a sticker that says uses the Armstrong FM system. All right, well, let's see. You can see very gradually the gloss will come back, and the more time that you spend applying, reapplying, the Bakelite will eventually start coming back. And sometimes they came from the factory almost like a mirror type gloss. And I think part of the reason I got this radio is because I thought to myself, if this were cleaned up, it'd be pretty attractive looking. Also, $10 provides me 2 evenings of entertainment. You can't even buy a hamburger for $10 these days. I'm probably not going to keep this radio. I'm probably going to literally give it to the museum and we'll just sell it. There's a interesting thing happening over at our place where for years what I've been doing is restoring tons and tons of these radios so that we can go to local antique shows and stuff and or events to sell the radios to raise money. And that it entails getting our trailer and loading it up and getting all the tables and getting up super early, bringing a very heavy battery bank to power the radios. And depending on the time of year, it's going to be either out in the hot baking sun or, well, we hired an actual director at our place, and that person's doing a wonderful job. And as a result, we have real visitors which I know sounds crazy because we're supposed to be a museum, but we have like a decent amount of visitors coming in. And they're seeing these sitting in our store, which honestly I've just been using for storage in between shows, not ever thinking anyone's ever going to buy any of these things up there, and they are. And so as a result, if the trend continues, I'm not sure if we're going to be doing as many traveling shows. Sorry, I just said that because we're listening to the Traveling Wilburys on the radio right now. And I was a huge ELO fan when I was a kid. So, of course, when the Traveling Wilburys became a group, I was hooked immediately. I have a theory about why so many fucking radios have house paint all over them. Because probably at some point these became not special anymore. They weren't the new radio in the house anymore. They became delegated to the garage. So if people were painting things or whatever, who cares? It's the crappy old Montgomery Ward's radio. Sometimes if you can't get some paint off, you can get like a kind of a blunt flat blade screwdriver. Just come at it from the side. And oftentimes it'll just pop right off. Just like that did. It's aggravating when people do shit like this. Then again, it's not like I'm going to go inside and like polish my beautiful 2010 era Samsung flat screen TV either, which is, to be fair, probably what this was assumed to be like at some point in its life. All right, well, kind of accomplished what I wanted to do, and which was essentially get the electronics done and get pretty much on a good path with the cabinet. I think in order for me to make this whole, I'm going to need to use my mechanical buffer, and I'm pretty certain a lot of you people do not want to hear that. I don't know. I'll stick around for just a little bit longer. I'll do one more pass with the car wax. I'll be back in just a second. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing all right, no matter where you're listening in from. Out here, we've had a shit ton of rain, just a ton of it. And, of course, our drains and infrastructure isn't made that much for handling rain because it doesn't do it as much out here, but when it does, like my yard's made out of rocks and sand, and my backyard flooded. So I've got a pump back there connected up to a couple of hoses that run to the front. And I had that going yesterday. It's ridiculous. It's like crap, I need to go deflood the yard. Oh, neighbor's cat's over here. Hey, Goose, come on. Goose. Never mind, he doesn't want to come over here.
And we started the show by taking you all the way to the end of the line tonight. The Allman Brothers, end of the line from the show, the world's album, Traveling into the Mavericks, the end of the line. It was Hooray for the Riff Raff, end of the line, and the Infamous Street Dusters to the end of the line from their new album 2020 that came out on Friday. We heard another one at the start of the show, Holding On to You. The Infamous Street Dusters, and then, well, I guess that's the end here at the beginning of the show tonight. You're on the Americana Pulse. Now, you are tuned into East Tennessee.
Yeah, this already looks a lot better than it did. It was pretty grimy when it started. Like, I think it looked like it was sitting in a barn or something.
Reach out to the show. You can send an email to music@wddx.com. Find me on Instagram.
Oh yeah, and when you wax these things, the thick, heavy paste wax is definitely the way to go. You don't want to use the liquid stuff. I have a harder time with that.
This is East Tennessee Zone at WDDX. Support for WDDX comes from Fisher Tire Company. Family owned and operated, Fisher Tire features an auto service center offering a variety of vehicle repairs and tire brands, including Michelin, BF Goodrich, and many others. Located at 3530 at FisherTireCompany.com, 865-687-5121, and support for WDDX.
Line noise on tube radios.
WDDX keep the music going by supporting the roots music, live performances, and East Tennessee Zone artists.
It's a good question. You know, when we're talking about refrigerators, you get noise on your tube radios. Unfortunately, these old tube radios, especially if it's like a hot chassis, sometimes they're affected, especially by things with motors in them. And what they're actually more affected by is wall warts and all the crap that you plug into your house. But if you have a tube radio and you're using it, you just want to make sure if you're using it like regularly that it's actually overhauled. You want to make sure that your capacitors, if they're past a certain age, are replaced, especially if it's been in service. But, you know, starting with a healthy radio with all new capacitors is one of the first surefire ways that you're getting the absolute cleanest possible noise out of it. The other thing you can try is maybe using a different outlet in the house, one that maybe doesn't have a refrigerator on it.
This is Andrew. Need someone on the Americana Pulse on WDDX.
All right. Like I said, sometimes this can take a pretty long time when you're refurbishing Bakelite. But this is application number probably 3 or 4, because each pass that I give it, the Bakelite is getting just a little more glossy. So I'm removing lots of dirt and lots of abrasion and stuff from years of it being used and sitting around, just existing. And if you're just patient, you can really make these things look pretty gorgeous. If you have just a pure Bakelite case that's brown Bakelite, some of it's gorgeous looking stuff. Like, you can really get some beautiful detail. Neighbor's cat is in my garage. Goose, come here. Hey girl, come on. Meow. Come here. Sorry, Goose comes by every other day and visits with me here in the garage. I'm trying to be wary about Goose because she pisses off my other cats when they see her. So probably when I go in, they're like, "You've been cheating on us with the neighbor's cat." I'm like, "Yes, I have. I have been cheating on you with the neighbor's cats. What are you going to do about it?" I always grew up with a ton of cats. We had just a herd of cats running around our property when I was a kid. We have a herd of cats in our house. There's a whole bunch of them. And they're all strays or ones we rescued. It seems like strays, for some reason, if they make the sweetest cats. And we had one cat who lived to be to the ripe old age of almost 22 years old. We sure miss her because that's like losing a family member when you have an animal that lives that long. Sometimes I wonder about what people do who do things like buy or get huge breeds of dogs. Some of those giant breeds only live for a few years. I don't think I'd want to have to say goodbye to my pets every 5 years. On the other hand, if you get a parrot, some of those things can live to be as long as a human. So you better get along with it or you're stuck. Parrot will start torturing you. Psychological torture from parrots. Yeah, this top was the worst. And I wonder how many hours are on this radio because if you were watching yesterday, two of the tubes that I tested in it that tested very weak were like late 60s era RCA replacements, which tells me a lot. If you have run a radio so long and hard that not only did you wear out the tubes that originally came with it, but also wore out completely the second set. I mean, contrary to popular belief, it takes many thousands of hours to completely deplete most of these tubes. And most of these radios, especially the American ones, will work remarkably well on extremely substandard quality, substandard emitting tubes. And so I think this set could have, tens of thousands of hours on it. To give you an idea how long tubes can last, the stereo that I'm listening to right now is my garage stereo, and I listen to it just about every day of the week for a minimum of about 4 hours. And the amplifier has, I'm trying to think, how many channels? 3 channels, 2 tubes per channel, 2, 4, 6. It's got 6 V6 tubes, 3 12AX7s, and for some reason a very strange rectifier, 3 DG4 3-volt rectifier. Well, after all that time, and keep in mind that I think a lot of the tubes are probably tubes that originally came with the amplifier. I've had one tube actually fail. It was the rectifier. The 6 V6s, the 12AX7s, they're perfectly fine. I test them every few years just out of my curiosity to make sure it's not time to replace any of them. And so far, I haven't replaced any of them in the 12 or so years the stereo's been out here running. I mean, if you look at it from a current reality perspective, most of these old radios, these tube radios and other vintage electronics, probably will last longer, or lasted longer back then, comparatively speaking, to how long electronics last now. Because when I go out for my walks or I'm out on my bicycle, there's so many TVs that are in the garbage. And you know why? Is because something failed on the board. And if the TV's, anywhere close to being old, like if it's close to 10 years old, either there's no parts availability, or the cost to repair is going to be more than it would cost just to buy another whole TV set. It seems like most people, when they buy electronics and consumer goods, they're lucky to own it for 5 years. You think about, for example, when people buy cell phones, they buy a cell phone probably on average every few years. It's like this $1,000 thing in your pocket that you replace every 3 years. Finally, I had to replace my old cell phone because it just finally wore out. I had it for 6 years. And I have to guiltily admit the new one is amazing. The camera's amazing. Everything about it is amazing. And it seems like it's also pretty tough because I've dropped it a few times. Okay, let me get this last little. Get out of the way, light. This keeps on getting into my space. It's looking a lot better. I am wondering about this plastic mesh and can I do anything about it? Well, we're going to flatten it out. Kind of don't want to mess with it too much while I'm ahead. But this isn't going to hurt anything. I'm just going to hit it up with a little heat. So it's complicated hair dryer. What is hot? Very hot. Both of them down. All right. That's not going to do anything. I think I'm just going to be okay with that because I'm afraid if I try to take this apart, this stuff is worse. That's plexiglass. I'm going to clean behind it, so I'm going to remove it. Word of the wise when you work on stuff like this that has old ink on it. Test an area first that doesn't show. Well, it's on there pretty solid.
Last week, he's announcing another new album coming early this year. Charlie Crockett's Kentucky Too Long. Cokie Lafarge's newest album came out on Friday. It's called Traveling with Cokie Lafarge, Voice and Guitar, Volume 1. This is a stripped down.
Okay. What I'm going to do is expedite what I'm about to do by showing you something.
Fast-paced medical drama, but they do take time on the show to honor those they need during the course of the day working in an emergency room. Show an emotional moment.
All right, this is Novus number 2. I'm just going to use my mechanical buffer for a minute, which will be noisy, I know. Damn it, I got no sleeve caught in that. Ignoring my shop teacher. No, I don't use lead-free solder. I use the old-fashioned stuff. And when I mean old, I have a bunch of vintage solder from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Yeah, that already looks a lot better. It's more. That must be plexiglass. Kind of behaves like plexiglass when it's polished. Let's put this back in there.
And this is not a Sonny Moore solo album per se. Sonny Moore and Ryan Rodriguez, they were friends in high school. They had a band in high school that I'm not going to say the name of that band, but Sonny Moore, Ryan Rodriguez, they put out a new album together, Days of Rain. And it's the old high school friends. It's Sonny Moore and Ryan Rodriguez, No Net Below, on the Americana Pulse on WDDX.
All right. Tell you what I'm going to do. I think that front will look a lot better if I had a brighter light to illuminate the dial. So that's what I'm going to do. It's going to get an LED. Not sure why that's not focusing properly. Not sure why it's not focusing on this properly. All right, let me put my knobs back on. Well, I went to rethink my knob situation. That did not work the way I thought it was going to work. I can fix that later. In the meantime, I can at least test this out. Not sure you can see this, but this illuminates much better now.
To keep the peace, you'll keep the coal train running. I'll find a way to keep those paychecks coming. Even though they say we're not there quite yet, we're not living in that old time feeling. We're not living in it.
You know what? I like that. I like that quite a bit. Again, I'll have to figure out what's going on with this knob. I was hoping this would solve the problem. It's not going down in there far enough, so what I think I'll do and just drill that out a little bit, but I'm not going to do that live because I'll fuck it up. But it's been about an hour anyway, an hour and 9 minutes to be exactly. I wonder how many of your viewers work on these old radios or just enjoy watching. I have no clue. No clue at all. I'd be bored watching my own videos, but that's just me. Anyhow, I'm going to sign off for the evening. I'm kind of hungry. I need to go in and eat some pasta anyway and some junk food. All right, guys. I hope you all are doing well, and be well wherever you happen to be. Have a great evening or morning or whoever or whatever time of day you're listening to it.